she had no one left. Not a soul in this frozen world. So she buried her son with her own hands, in the middle of a blizzard, and whispered goodbye. But just as she laid the last stone, a stranger appeared through the snow and said, "He's not dead." The wind screamed across the Montana plains, tearing through trees and snapping at Eliza Monroe's cloak. Snow swirled like ghosts, thick and endless. Her fingers were raw and red, gripping the edge of a shovel now heavy with grief. She knelt at the tiny grave, her breath coming in sobs visible in the cold air. The ground was half frozen, and she'd used every last ounce of strength to dig it deep enough. Inside lay her only child, Jacob, wrapped in the warmest blanket she owned, the same one she used to swaddle him as a newborn, just 5 years old. He was just 5. He had been sick for days. The fever came sudden and mean. No doctor could reach their cabin through the mountain storm. She tried herbs, prayers, firelight. Nothing could keep the cold from sinking into his little bones, and this morning he was gone. Now Eliza placed the last stone above him and collapsed beside it. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "Mama's so sorry." But then, clip, clop, the sound cut through the wind like a warning. Eliza froze. She turned her head slowly. There, emerging from the white curtain of snow, was a black horse, and, on it, a rider cloaked in dark leather, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. She stood up fast, fear flickering in her chest. Strangers didn't come out here, not in storms, not at graves. The rider stopped a few feet away. He looked down at the mound of snow and wood. Then his gaze met hers, deep and unblinking, and he said, calm, certain, bone-chilling, "He's not dead." The rider's voice wasn't loud, but it hit her like a gunshot. Eliza stared at him, stunned. The wind tossed her loose strands of hair across her tear-stained face. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Just the sharp whistle of the storm, between them. What did you say?" she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The man dismounted. He moved with the stillness of someone used to danger. Every motion was slow, precise. He knelt beside the tiny grave, brushing snow off the stones with a gloved hand. I said, "This boy ain't dead. Not in the way you think." Eliza's breath caught. She stepped forward instinctively, then stopped. Her boots crunched in the snow. "You're mad," she said. "He's gone." His skin was cold. His eyes... Shh. The rider raised one finger. A strange silence fell. Even the wind seemed to hush. Eliza watched, heart pounding, as the man pulled a small satchel from his belt. From it, he removed a small vial filled with dark red liquid, thicker than blood. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man uncorked the vial. "Something old. Something most folk don't believe in no more. I ain't here to take, ma'am. I'm here to return what was borrowed." He placed one palm flat on the stones, his head bowed like a man at prayer. Then he poured a single drop of the red liquid into the snow above the grave. Eliza didn't know whether to scream, cry, or run. Her heart screamed this was madness. Some kind of sick trick, but then she heard it. Thump. She blinked. No, it had to be the wind. Thump again. Louder this time, beneath the earth, from the grave. She dropped to her knees, hands trembling. "Jacob!" "Dig," the man said softly. Now, she didn't wait. Her fingers tore at the snow, at the rocks, at the wooden slats she'd nailed shut with shaking hands just an hour before. It made no sense, but her heart didn't care. Snow flew. Boards cracked. The rider stayed silent beside her. And then, there, he was. Jacob. Pale. Still. Lips blue, but eyes fluttering. "Jacob," she sobbed, pulling him up, clutching his tiny body against hers. His chest moved, barely, but it moved. He coughed. He coughed. "Mama?" He croaked. She cried out, kissing his forehead again and again. "I'm here, baby, I'm here." The rider stood, brushing snow from his knees. He turned toward his horse without a word. "Wait!" Eliza cried. Who are you?" He paused, then said just 4 words. "The man your husband sent." And with that, he rode off into the storm. Eliza stood in the storm, clutching Jacob's trembling body to her chest. The snow bit at her cheeks, but she didn't feel it anymore. Her heart thundered too loud. Her mind spun too fast. The rider had vanished, just like he came. Into the white nothing. But his words echoed in her skull like a church bell. "The man your husband sent." It didn't make sense. Her husband, Caleb Monroe, had been dead for over a year, shot down in the hills by road agents, or so the sheriff claimed. There'd been no body, just a blood-soaked coat and his pistol found by the river bend. She never got answers, only a folded flag and empty condolences. And now, this stranger, this ghost of a man, had brought back her son from death. Was she dreaming? Had grief finally broken her? Jacob stirred weakly in her arms. "Mama," he whispered. It was dark and cold, but I heard Daddy calling me. He said not to sleep. Tears streamed down Eliza's face. "You're safe. Now, baby, Mama's got you." She gathered him tighter and trudged toward the cabin, snow crunching under each determined step. Her legs felt like lead. Her arms ached. But she didn't stop until the door slammed shut behind them and the fire crackled back to life. She laid Jacob by the hearth, wrapping him in every blanket they owned. His eyes fluttered, his breathing shallow but steady. She touched his forehead. The fever was gone, like it had never existed. She rocked back on her heels, staring into the flames. Who was that man? Why did he say Caleb sent him? And what in God's name had he poured into the snow? Eliza didn't sleep that night. She sat by Jacob, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Every now and then he murmured things in his sleep, about voices in the snow. Someone whispering his name, a hand pulling him upward from cold darkness. At dawn, someone knocked on the cabin door. Her breath hitched. Slowly she rose, stepped toward the door and opened it just a crack. It wasn't the rider. It was the sheriff. Sheriff Clay Warren with his snow-dusted badge and tired eyes. "Eliza," he said, tilting his hat. "Heard the storm hit hard up here, just checking on folks." She nodded. "We're fine." His eyes shifted. "You sure? You look like you've seen a ghost." She opened the door wider, just enough to let him see the small form wrapped in blankets. Near the fire. His eyes widened. That your boy? I thought he passed." "He's alive," she said quietly. Sheriff Warren stared at her, then leaned in slightly. "You seen anyone last night?" he asked slowly. "Anyone you didn't recognize?" She hesitated. "Why?" The sheriff looked over his shoulder, then back at her. His voice dropped. "Because 3 towns over, someone was shot dead in a saloon yesterday. Took a bullet clean through the heart. Man should have died on the spot." But he stood up, whispered something about a child in the snow, then rode off before anyone could stop him. He looked her dead in the eye. "Eliza, what the hell's going on out here?" Eliza didn't answer right away. She stared at Sheriff Warren, her hand still resting on the doorframe, heart thudding like a drum in her ears. "What do you mean? He stood up after getting shot in the heart?" she asked. Sheriff's jaw tightened. "Just what I said. Witnesses said he dropped, bled out, then got back up. Said something about the boy in the storm, and then vanished." Eliza swallowed. Hard. That wasn't coincidence. She remembered the stranger's last words. "The man your husband sent." She gripped the edge of the door. "Sheriff, if you know something about Caleb, now's the time to say it." Warren exhaled slowly, snow gathering on his hat brim. "I never told you the full story. We said Caleb died in those hills. We found his coat, his pistol." She nodded. "I remember. I waited for weeks. No body. That's 'cause we never found it, Warren said. Just blood. Enough to make anyone think he was gone, but no tracks leaving the scene. No sign of struggle, just his things, laid out neat, like he wanted us to think he was dead. Eliza's hands went cold. You lied to me. We thought it was mercy, he said quietly. You were grieving, alone with the boy. And Caleb, he'd been acting strange for months, slipping away at night, disappearing for days, said he was dealing with something bigger than lawmen. We figured he ran off or got into something too dark to explain. Eliza shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. He wouldn't leave us. I didn't think so either. But Eliza, your husband wasn't who you thought he was. She stared at him. The fire crackled behind her. Jacob stirred. Then she said, Come in. Warren stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. He knelt by Jacob, blinking as he saw the boy's cheeks had color again. By God, he whispered. He looks like he never even fell sick. I buried him, Clay, Eliza said, voice low. I nailed shut the box. I said goodbye. And then, someone came. The sheriff stood, his face pale. You mean the rider? She nodded. He said Caleb sent him. He gave Jacob something, some red liquid. I don't know what it was, but it brought him back. Warren stared into the fire, lips pressed thin. I heard stories, he muttered. Back when I wore a younger man's boots, about a group of men, gunfighters, bounty hunters, wanderers. They took oaths under blood, said they'd protect the West from things most folks pretended didn't exist. He looked at her. Your husband, Caleb Monroe, rode with them once. I think that's who came last night. Eliza's breath caught. Then why fake his death? Why leave me alone? Warren's eyes were sad. Because, Eliza, if what I heard is true, your husband didn't leave to protect himself. He left to protect you. And whatever's coming next. He glanced toward the window, where the storm had started again, harder this time. I reckon it's not done with you yet. The next morning, the storm had buried the world in silence. Eliza stood by the window, eyes scanning the endless white that stretched beyond her ranch. The trees groaned under the weight of fresh snow. The trail leading to town was gone. The world looked cleansed, but not safe. Sheriff Warren had left before dawn, saying he'd return with a tracker, someone who might recognize the rider who saved Jacob. But Eliza wasn't waiting on lawmen anymore. She was waiting on ghosts. Jacob was sleeping deeply now, his skin warm, breath even, but his fingers clutched something, tightly, like a secret. She gently pried it from his grip. It was an old leather pouch, cracked and stitched with Caleb's initials. Her heart froze. She'd seen it once before, years ago, on their wedding day. Caleb had told her it held emergency instructions. She'd thought he was just being dramatic. But now, hands trembling, she opened it. Inside was a folded, yellowed letter. On the back, Caleb's handwriting stared back at her. Only to be opened, if he returns from the dead. Eliza staggered back, her legs buckling. She sat near the hearth, staring at the letter in disbelief. If he returns? Who? She tore it open, breath caught in her chest. Eliza, if you're reading this, then something unnatural has touched our son. And the man I once was, the man you married, is gone for good. I never wanted this life for you. Not the blood, not the bargains. Years ago, before I met you, I rode with men who weren't just lawmen or outlaws. We hunted things that couldn't be explained. We made oaths to protect folks like you, from the shadows that walked in daylight. But some things demand a price. Jacob was born with something inside him, something I passed on. The day I left, I wasn't running. I was buying time. Because the thing that followed me for years finally found my trail, and it won't stop until it gets what it came for. If someone comes for Jacob, and he will, do not trust him. Even if he says I sent him. Especially if he says I sent him. Lock the cellar. Burn the old chest. And for God's sake, don't let Jacob sleep too long. If he does, it might not be Jacob who wakes up. Eliza dropped the letter. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. Her son, her sweet boy, had died. And something brought him back. Was it really Jacob sleeping by the fire? She rushed to him, kneeling. "Jacob?" she whispered, brushing his hair back. His eyes fluttered open slowly. They looked darker, not evil, just distant, like he was still somewhere else. "Eliza," he whispered. She blinked. "Not Mama, not Mom, Eliza." Her blood ran cold. Eliza backed away from Jacob slowly. "Why did you call me Eliza?" she asked, voice trembling. The boy blinked. "Isn't that your name?" A pause, long enough for her heart to nearly stop. Then he smiled, sleepy, innocent. "Sorry, Mama. Must be the dream still in my head." She nodded slowly, but she didn't believe him. As he drifted back into sleep, she slipped away, gripping Caleb's letter in her shaking hands. Lock the cellar. Burn the old chest. She had no intention of burning anything until she understood what the hell was going on. The cellar had been shut for years. Caleb had nailed it closed himself before he vanished. He'd said it was unsafe. The wood was rotting, the steps unstable. Now she realized. He hadn't been hiding the rot. He'd been hiding something else. She lit a lantern and walked to the pantry where the trapdoor was hidden beneath sacks of flour and dried meat. She dragged them aside, revealing the boards, still sealed. Her fingers traced the nails, old, rusted, but undisturbed, until now. She fetched a crowbar and pried them loose one by one, heart pounding louder with each creak of splintering wood. With a final heave, the door groaned open. A gust of cold air hit her, not musty like she expected. No, this was colder than the outside storm, like the ground itself was exhaling. She held the lantern low and began to descend. The steps groaned under her weight, but didn't give way. The air was thick, dust and something older, metallic. At the bottom, her lantern caught the glint of iron. Chains, thick, rusted chains bolted into the stone foundation. A ring lay in the center, like something had once been shackled here and next to it. A wooden chest, not burned, untouched. Eliza stepped closer. The chest was carved with symbols, circles, crosses, a language she didn't know. The lid was cracked but not open. Something pulsed in the air around it, a vibration just beneath the skin. She reached for it, but a voice stopped her. "Don't." She spun around, lantern shaking. No one, only the shadows danced on the walls. Her breath misted. Then she looked back at the chest, and it was open. Just a sliver, just enough to show teeth, not animal, not human, like something had been sleeping. Inside it for years, something that hadn't fully left. She stumbled back, heart racing. Her lantern slipped from her hand and shattered, plunging her into darkness. From the top of the stairs, a voice called down. "Mama?" It was Jacob, but the way he said it, soft, slow, like someone trying on a word they hadn't used in years. "Eliza," the voice said again. "Are you down there with it?" She didn't answer. She couldn't, because behind her, in the dark, something breathed. Eliza pressed herself against the stone wall, her breath ragged in the dark. The broken lantern at her feet hissed as its last drop of oil burned out. Above her, the cellar door creaked again. Slow. Intentional. "Mama?" came Jacob's voice. "Did you find what Daddy left?" Her heart hammered. That wasn't her boy's voice. Not really. Too calm. Too knowing. She ran her hand along the wall, fingers brushing cold iron. The old chains again. Her other hand found a rusted pipe. She gripped it tight. She would not die. In the dark, she would not let that thing take her son. Suddenly, a whisper curled through the cellar like smoke. "Eliza!" She spun. The chest, now wide open, had spilled something black onto the stone floor. Not smoke, not shadow, but something living. It moved like liquid, but it clicked, as if it had bones, and then, from within that blackness, a shape emerged. Tall. Humanoid. But wrong. Its skin shimmered like it was stitched from night itself. No eyes. No mouth. But still. She felt it looking at her. "You opened it," it said. The voice was not loud, but it didn't have to be. It slid inside her ears, like a blade made of breath. "What are you?" she demanded, raising the pipe. It tilted its head. "I'm the reason Caleb ran." A pause. "I'm the oath he broke, the debt he died trying to pay." Eliza's hands trembled. "Why my son?" The thing stepped closer, the chains on the floor hissing as it passed over them. "Because his blood sings with what Caleb borrowed, and never returned." "Borrowed?" she whispered. "Power, protection, a promise sealed in flesh, and now, it is Jacob who owes me." She lunged. The pipe swung through the thing like wind. It didn't flinch, just reached out, and for a heartbeat, just one, she saw its hand turn into Caleb's. Familiar, rough, ring still on his finger. "Eliza," it said, softer now. "He tried to save you, but you were already mine." She fell backward, breath stolen by shock. But before the thing could move again, a deep, low growl echoed from the stairs. Jacob, but not as a boy. As something else. The creature paused, its head turned toward the sound. "Eliza," it whispered. "He's not your son anymore." The shadows recoiled, retreating into the chest like water sucked into dry earth. Then, silence. The chest slammed shut, with a deafening crack. Eliza gasped, scrambling to the stairs. Jacob stood there, pale and sweating, but his eyes, they were glowing faintly gold. He reached down and helped her up. "I saw it too," he said. "In my dream." "What is happening?" "To you?" she asked. He looked down at his hands, flexing them like they didn't quite fit. "I think I'm becoming what Papa was afraid of." Eliza didn't sleep that night. Jacob did, but his body twitched with every dream. She sat by the fire, the old chest now back in the cellar, locked but not sealed. Her hand clutched the only weapon she had left, Caleb's second letter, the one she hadn't dared read until now. She unfolded it slowly. "If you're reading this, Eliza, it means I failed." Her throat tightened. "You've seen it, heard it. Maybe even felt it in Jacob. It's in his blood, because I made a deal before he was ever born." Eliza's hands began to tremble. "It was 12 years ago, after your second miscarriage. The doctor said you couldn't carry again. We were broken, you and I. You cried yourself to sleep. I punched God in the dark, and then someone knocked on the barn door." Eliza's heart dropped. He wasn't a man. He looked like one, but his eyes never blinked, and his boots didn't leave prints in the snow. "He said he could give us a child. Not adoption, not medicine. A real son, born from you with my blood in his veins. The price? A promise." "Eliza, read on, barely breathing. The child would be ours, until his 12th winter. And then, the promise would come due." Tears blurred her vision. "I thought I could break it, outrun it, kill it even. That's why I left. Not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you too much to let you see what I'd become. I failed, Eliza. He's coming for Jacob now. He always keeps his promises." The letter ended there. No instructions, no hope, just one. Line at the bottom, scratched in darker ink, like it was added in panic. Don't let Jacob answer if he knocks. Eliza dropped the letter, her breath catching in her chest, because outside, through the storm, someone knocked 3 times. Firm, patient. Jacob stirred in his sleep. No, Eliza whispered, running to the door. Another knock. Her fingers hovered over the rifle on the mantel. Jacob sat up slowly, his voice soft. He's here. She turned. Don't open that door. He didn't move toward it, but he did say something that shattered her. I think part of me already has. Eliza didn't move. The third knock echoed through the cabin like a gunshot inside her chest. Jacob was sitting on the edge of the bed now, his bare feet planted firmly on the floor, his eyes vacant, almost ancient. Eliza, he said, but not in his voice. Lower, richer, a tone Caleb once used when praying to something he didn't understand. She clutched the rifle tighter. I said don't speak to it. I'm not, Jacob whispered. It's speaking through me. The knocking stopped. Silence swallowed the room, heavy as snow on a coffin. Eliza inched toward the window, brushing aside the curtain with the rifle barrel. Nothing. No footprints. No shadows. Just the wind dragging through the trees like it was searching for something it had lost. Then, scratching. Not at the door. Under the floorboards, right beneath her. She dropped to her knees, pressing her ear to the old planks. A whisper crawled up like steam. Eliza! She leapt back. That voice, not just a memory, it was Caleb. But it couldn't be. She grabbed the lantern and yanked up the loose boards. The same boards Caleb had warned her never to touch. Beneath them, not just dirt, but stone. Carved symbols. And in the center, a bone knife wrapped in cloth. Eliza pulled it out with trembling hands. The second it touched the air, Jacob gasped and fell to his knees. It burns, he said, voice cracking. The symbols beneath the floor began to glow, faint, red, as if waking after years asleep. That's when she heard the crunch of boots in the snow. Someone was walking toward the cabin. Eliza moved to the window again. Not a shadow, not a monster, but a man, tall, wearing a black duster, a hat pulled low, and a silver chain around his neck that shimmered even in the dark. Her breath caught. He was supposed to be dead. 10 years ago, the man who cursed Caleb had vanished in the fire Caleb set. But he was back and walking toward the porch like he never left. Eliza pointed the rifle through the door, but Jacob spoke again, in a voice that wasn't his. You can't shoot the one who holds the chain, Mama. Eliza's hands shook. Who is he? Jacob's voice trembled. The debt collector. And then, as if the words were an invitation, the man knocked once more. But not with his hand. This time, the knock was inside her head, a soundless summons. Eliza felt the pressure in her chest as if her heart was being squeezed in a vice. The man standing outside wasn't just a ghost from the past. He was a nightmare that had never truly left. She raised the rifle, her hands no longer shaking. She wasn't just defending herself now, she was defending her son. I know you're... There, the man's voice carried through the wood, smooth and cold. I can smell the fear in your heart. The door groaned as though it was reluctant to open, but she knew the knock wouldn't stop. Jacob stood frozen, his face pale, eyes hollow with the knowledge he could never escape. He's not leaving. Mama, Jacob murmured, still speaking with that strange, foreign tone. The collector always gets his due. Shut up, Jacob, Eliza snapped, turning back to her son, but her voice was empty. There was nothing to say. What could she do? The man's voice called from the other side. Caleb knew this day would come. He knew the cost. He knew I would come for what was promised. Eliza's mind raced. Caleb's debt. What had he done to get involved with this creature? The knocking continued. Louder now. Bang. 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 She turned to Jacob again. His face was contorted in pain, his hands clutching his stomach. "It's him, Mama," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I can feel it inside me. The same thing that burned Papa." The silence between the knocks stretched out, longer and longer, until it became unbearable. Eliza had never been this afraid in her life. This wasn't a man knocking at her door. This was a curse. A thing born of darkness, stretching back into Caleb's secret past, demanding the payment owed for something she didn't even understand. Suddenly, the door slammed open, shaking the frame. The man in the duster stepped inside. His eyes were pure black, endless pools of nothingness, yet somehow she felt drawn into them. His face was familiar, but so distorted, like an image reflected in water after a storm. "You owe," he said, his voice like sandpaper scraping against stone. "Get away from my son!" Eliza shouted, stepping between the figure and Jacob. The man's lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile, just a stretching of something unnatural. "It is not your son who owes, woman," he said. "It is you. And him." Eliza gripped the rifle tighter, but she knew it wouldn't help. No bullet would stop this. "What do you want?" she demanded. "What do you want from us?" The man's smile widened as if he were savoring her fear. "I want what was promised," he replied, "and I will collect, whether by death or by blood." Suddenly, the room grew cold. The air thickened with the smell of decay. It felt as though the very earth beneath her feet had turned to stone, heavy and unyielding. Jacob stepped forward, his face emotionless, his eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. "I am what Caleb owed," he said in that voice that wasn't his. I am the price. I am the debt." Eliza turned toward her son in horror. "No, Jacob, no, you're my boy. You are not what they want." But Jacob stepped closer to the man. "I've always been what he owed." The room seemed to pulse, as if something ancient and terrible was waking. The man reached forward, laying a hand on Jacob's shoulder, and in that moment, Eliza saw something she couldn't comprehend. A darkness that flowed between them, a tangible thing that connected their fates forever. "I can't take it back," Jacob said, his voice breaking for the first time. "It's inside me now." Eliza's heart shattered. "No," she sobbed, reaching for him. "Jacob, please, please don't go with him." But it was too late. The man turned, pulling Jacob toward him with unnatural ease. "Come, boy," he said. "It's time to fulfill your destiny." Eliza reached out in desperation, but the cold, oppressive force of the figure and her son's unblinking gaze pushed her back. "You can't save him," the man whispered, "but you can try." Eliza stood frozen in the doorway as Jacob disappeared into the night with that thing, that collector in human skin. The silence left behind was heavier than any scream. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the floor, her palms hitting the wood with a hollow thud. The lamp flickered on the table, casting twisted shadows of a mother's breaking heart. But Eliza Monroe didn't stay down long. She had buried a husband, survived years of drought, hunger, and the cruel stares of townsfolk who never thought she'd last alone on a ranch. But she had, and she'd be damned if she let her son be taken by the same evil that stole her husband. She stood, grabbed Caleb's old satchel from the closet, and dumped its contents on the floor. Letters, maps, a worn journal wrapped in leather and tied with twine. The twine snapped easily. Inside were words that burned. "If this book is ever opened, it means I failed to outrun my sins. And now, they're coming for you, too." Eliza's hands trembled as she turned the pages. Each line revealed a secret. Her husband had taken to the grave, or so she thought. He had made a pact. Not for gold, not for glory, but for a child. Years ago, Caleb had wandered deep into Apache territory, broken and desperate after their third stillborn loss. He had begged the old ways for help, and something ancient, something older than tribes, older than time, had answered. It gave them Jacob, a perfect, breathing miracle. But every miracle has a price. Caleb had promised that when the boy turned 12, the debt would be collected. That debt was now walking into the desert, and Eliza wasn't about to let it be paid. She stormed out into the cold, rifle in hand, the journal stuffed into her coat. The moon lit the plains in silver, and already she could see the strange trail left by the collector's boots, prints that didn't sink into the snow, as if they weren't from this world at all. She followed, them past the creek, past the broken fence Caleb never fixed. Her breath fogged before her face, but her eyes were fire. In the distance, she saw them. Two silhouettes, one tall and looming, the other small and hesitant. Jacob turned for a moment. Even from here, Eliza could feel the war in his heart. He was still fighting, but so was the darkness inside him. Suddenly, from the trees, a whistle pierced the air. Eliza dropped low, raising the rifle. Another man emerged from the brush. Not the collector, not Jacob, but someone else, a stranger. He wore a black hat, his coat dusty, eyes shaded but gleaming like steel. You don't want to follow them, alone, he said calmly, stepping forward with his hands raised. You won't like where they're going. Eliza didn't lower her gun. Who the hell are you? He gave a half smile, one corner of his mouth twitching like he hadn't done it in years. Let's just say, I've followed him before. She narrowed her eyes. You know what he is? The man nodded. I've seen the debt collected, in 5 towns. I've seen children vanish into the night, but I also know something the others didn't. There's one way to break the curse. Eliza lowered the rifle an inch. Her voice cracked. How? The man stepped closer, pulled out a silver medallion from under his coat, shaped like a serpent eating its own tail. You'll need blood. Yours, his, and the one who made the deal. Eliza felt the world spin around her. Caleb's dead, she whispered. The stranger tilted his head. Then you better hope the truth is colder than his grave. Eliza stared at the man before her. His coat flapped in the cold wind, and the silver medallion around his neck shimmered like it carried a storm inside. Her fingers tightened on the rifle's grip. Who are you really? She asked, voice low. The man looked over his shoulder toward the dark trail Jacob and the collector had taken. My name's Eli Carter. I was 10 when my little sister was taken by him. The weight of his words struck her like a bullet. She didn't ask more. She didn't have to. She saw the haunted look in his eyes. The kind only loss could carve. Eli knelt beside the snow, ran his fingers over the footprints that didn't sink. These ain't tracks, not really. They're more like shadows left behind, which means we don't have long. Eliza swallowed. You said something about Caleb, about blood. Eli stood, brushed snow from his gloves. That pact your husband made, it's old magic, binding. The only way to undo it is to spill the blood of all 3. The one who made the deal, the one born of it, and the one who tries to stop it. I never made a deal, she said quickly. You tried to stop it the moment you followed them, Eli replied. That's enough. The moment you resisted, it made you part of the story. Eliza's heart pounded as the pieces began to shift. But Caleb's dead, buried up on the hill. Eli looked her dead in the eyes. Then we dig him up. Silence stretched between them, wide and cold. I buried him myself, Eliza whispered. Bodies rot, but deals? Eli shook his head. Deals linger. The two set off up the slope, lanterns in hand. The snow glowed blue under the moon, and the only sound was the crunch of boots and the occasional howl from far off. Not a wolf, not a coyote, but something in between. Something watching. At the top of the hill, the wooden cross still stood, leaning slightly from years of wind. Eliza dropped to her knees, brushed snow away from the name carved into the wood. Caleb Monroe. She had never cried at this grave. I never dared. Until now. Eli handed her a shovel. You sure? No, she whispered. But I'm not losing Jacob. They dug. The earth fought them, frozen stiff like bone. But inch by inch, foot by foot, they reached the coffin. Eliza paused, breath steaming, hand trembling over the latch. With a deep breath, she opened it and screamed. The coffin was empty, just an old, tattered coat and a letter. It was sealed in wax, with a mark she'd seen once before, on the journal. Caleb left behind. She tore it open. The handwriting was his. Eliza, if you're reading this, it means the past has come for what I promised. I tried to undo it. I tried to kill myself before they came, but it doesn't matter now. I'm not where you think I am. I had to leave. Because if they found me, they'd take you too. I made a deal, and deals don't die. The words blurred, with her tears. Eli leaned in. He's not dead, not really, and if he's still breathing, we might have a chance. A howl split the sky. Closer this time. Eliza wiped her face. We find him. We end this. And from deep in the woods, a voice whispered through the trees, a voice she hadn't heard in years. Eliza. She spun around, lantern held high. There, half shrouded in mist, stood a man in a worn coat, pale, hollow, eyes full of sorrow. Caleb? She breathed, but the man didn't answer. He only held out a trembling hand, and then vanished into the snow. Eliza. The voice clung to the trees like smoke, cold, familiar, echoing from somewhere both near and far. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping the lantern. The snow swallowed the sound of her gasp. Eli stepped in front of her, revolver raised toward the woods. Stay behind me. But Eliza didn't listen. Her legs moved on their own, driven by a sound her heart hadn't heard in years, the voice of the man she buried with her own hands. She followed it through the trees, deeper and deeper, as if something ancient had grabbed her soul and was pulling it by a thread. And there, in the clearing, under the hanging moss and moonlight, stood Caleb, or the shell of him. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, but it was him. His hand still bore the ring she placed there on a trembling wedding night. Yet something was wrong, not just with his appearance, but with the air around him. Eliza. His voice was softer now, more human. He stepped forward, snow untouched beneath his boots. She froze. You're alive. Caleb's eyes glistened. No, I'm something in between. A tear slipped down her cheek, burning like fire in the cold. Why did you leave me? Why pretend to die? I didn't have a choice. He looked over his shoulder, as if the trees themselves were listening. When Jacob was born, they came for him. Said the blood pact had to be paid. I thought if I died, they'd leave you alone. But they only grew angrier. Eliza's lip quivered. You should have told me. I couldn't. Caleb looked broken, every word weighing down his shoulders. If I told you, they'd have taken you too. But now there's no hiding. They have Jacob. Eli stepped into the clearing, gun still up, but now trembling. You the one who made the deal? Caleb nodded slowly. Then tell me how we stop it, Eli snapped. You don't, Caleb said. You can only offer something greater. Eliza stepped forward. Greater than a child? Caleb's gaze dropped. A soul willingly given, not taken, given. The silence fell like a blade. The trees didn't move. Even the wind held its breath. Eliza looked at him. You're talking about me. Caleb's jaw tightened. No, I'll go. I'll give myself up. Maybe they'll let him go. No. Eli stepped forward. I know these kind of deals. They don't negotiate. They hunger. The only way to break it is to face them. All three. Caleb's head snapped up. You know of the three? I lost someone to them, Eli said. My sister, I've been hunting them ever since. A low rumble echoed through the trees, like thunder beneath the snow. They're coming, Caleb whispered. We don't have much time. Eliza's voice cracked. Where is Jacob? Taken to the place the deal was made, Caleb replied. The Black Hollow. Eli's face turned pale. That's where my sister disappeared. The name hung in the cold, carrying a chill deeper than death. We go now, Eliza said, fire igniting behind her eyes. We end it tonight. But if we go, Caleb warned, one of us won't return. She looked at him. Then we make sure it's not our son. The sky was bleeding crimson as they rode. Snow kicked up behind the horses like smoke from a dying fire. The silence between them was heavier than words, each rider gripped by fear, but even more by purpose. Eliza held onto the reins like she was holding onto Jacob's heartbeat. Eli rode ahead, his eyes fixed forward. He had seen the Black Hollow once, years ago, but even memory trembled at the thought of returning. Caleb, pale and strange, rode at the rear. He hadn't spoken since they left the cabin. His presence wasn't human anymore, and even the horses sensed it, their breaths sharp, their muscles twitching. As the trees began to thin, a foul wind brushed against Eliza's cheek. It carried no scent, just a feeling, a warning. They arrived at a clearing, barren, blackened, where even snow refused to settle. In the center stood 3 tall stones in a triangle, jagged like broken teeth. The Black Hollow. Eliza dismounted first. Her boots crunched over dead leaves and old bones. Suddenly, a whisper. Not from behind, not from the wind, but from within. Eliza. She froze. It was Jacob's voice. Where is he? She cried out. Where's my son? The air shimmered. And then they appeared. 3 figures. Not fully there, like smoke trapped in form. Their faces were covered with veils, their hands long and clawed like dried roots. They moved without walking, floating an inch above the dead earth. Eli raised his rifle. Caleb grabbed his arm. Don't! They'll listen to blood, one of the beings hissed. Eliza stepped forward. Then take mine. Leave my son. The figures turned to her. Willing, brave, but not yet enough. Caleb's voice cracked. Take me. One figure floated toward him. Already half ours. Then finish it, he shouted. Let the boy go. Silence. Then a scream. Jacob's tore through the hollow like a knife through sky. Eliza spun around. He's here! She bolted toward the sound, through the stones, through the veil of the unseen. Her vision blurred. The world warped. And then, there he was. Jacob, suspended midair, arms out, face pale as winter. A red cord of light bound him, pulsing like a heartbeat. Eliza! Eli shouted, charging in after her, but the moment he crossed the stones and the ground erupted, hands from the earth. Grabbing his legs, pulling, faces emerged, hollow-eyed things, souls lost to the hollow long ago. Eliza, run! But she didn't. She rushed to Jacob, reaching for him. Touch him, a voice warned, and you take his place. I don't care. And she did. The moment her hand touched Jacob's chest, the red light exploded, blinding, screaming, and then silence. She was standing, alone, Jacob in her arms, breathing, the hollow, gone. The stones crumbled, the sky no longer bleeding but blue, but Caleb was gone. And Eli stood at a distance, his rifle lowered, his face pale. He gave his soul to buy your son's breath. Eliza fell to her knees, holding Jacob tight. He died twice for us. No, Eli said. This time, he chose it. Snow fell soft and slow like feathers from heaven, but Eliza felt none of its calm. She sat by the fire inside the cabin, Jacob sleeping beside her, his chest finally rising and falling with rhythm, not fear. But her hands, they trembled. Eli leaned against the doorframe, his rifle hanging on the wall behind him, untouched. His hat was off, and his hair had more silver than she remembered. Eliza, he said gently, what happened out there? It ain't something we'll ever explain to folks, maybe even to ourselves. She nodded barely. He's alive, she whispered. But Caleb, Eli looked into the flames. Caleb walked into that hollow knowing what he was doing. That boy, he'd already been touched by it long ago. You mean he wasn't just sick? No, Eli said, voice hard. He was marked, since birth maybe. I seen it once before, during the war. Some kids, they draw things to 'em. Darkness, spirits. Whole towns go quiet round 'em. But Caleb, he fought it longer than anyone had the right to. Eliza clenched her fists. He shouldn't have died. Eli shook his head. He didn't die, Eliza. He chose. There's a difference. He looked at that hollow and offered himself to save someone else. That's more than most good men ever do. There was a long silence. Only the fire spoke. Jacob stirred, murmuring in his sleep. Mama. She bent close, brushing his hair back. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Then, a sound. Knock. 3 slow raps on the cabin door. Eli rose instantly. No one should be out here this time of night. Eliza stood too, heart racing. She held Jacob close as Eli opened the door, rifle now in hand. But outside, nothing. Just snow. No tracks, no wind. Only a folded piece of paper pinned to the door with a rusted nail. Eli pulled it free, unfolded it, his face drained of color. Eliza stepped forward. What is it? He handed her the note. In shaky, blood-red ink, it read, The hollow never takes just one. Her knees buckled. Eli caught her. Jacob, she whispered, clutching her son. What if it's not over? Eli didn't speak. He just looked at the trees, and in the distance, beyond the hills where no path should be, a faint, flickering lantern was moving. Deeper into the woods, and though it was miles away, they both heard it. A low voice. Familiar. Calling a name. Not Jacob. Not Eliza. But Eli. The hollow had chosen again. The night passed slow. Not like time moving forward, but like it was watching. Them. Waiting. Eli sat by the door, rifle across his lap, staring into the dark woods where the lantern had flickered. He hadn't slept. Eliza stayed near Jacob, brushing his hair, humming lullabies older than memory. But her eyes, they stayed on Eli. You think it's coming for you? She finally asked. Eli didn't answer. He didn't have to, because in his gut, the part of him that survived the war, the losses, the silence, he already knew. The hollow had picked him, and it never missed its mark. I'll lead it away, he said, standing. Take the boy. Ride west. Don't stop till you hit warmth and people. Elijah, no. I ain't got a family to go back to, he said quietly. But you do. She stepped forward, tears rising fast. Don't you dare say that. You saved us. That should count for something. He placed his hand on her shoulder. It does. It counts for you. A moment passed, then 2. And Eliza pulled him into a hug so fierce it made the fire crackle. You're not alone, Eli. Not anymore. He swallowed hard. Just promise me. You'll tell him about Caleb, about how brave he was. I will. He stepped out into the cold dawn. The snow had stopped. The world was quiet. But far beyond, just past the tree line, that lantern was still moving. And Eli walked toward it, one step at a time, not with fear, but with purpose. Because some men don't run from darkness. They walk straight into it, to make sure others never have to. A year later, the wind was warm in the hills of Dakota. Eliza sat on the porch of a small cabin, watching Jacob play with a wooden horse Caleb had carved. He was strong now, bright, curious. And every night before bed, she told him stories. About a man who carried silence like a badge, about a boy who gave everything so another might live, and about the hollow, and the light that finally swallowed it. But the last story she always saved for last. the one about the gunslinger who didn't ride off into the sunset, but into the shadows, because someone had to. And you, watching this right now, if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something deep, then do one thing for us. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and tell us in the comments, what would you sacrifice to protect someone you love? This was Luminous Tales, where every story leaves behind a spark. Until next time, partner, ride safe.